morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us and welcome to CarbonStore's latest webinar, focusing today on helping sustainability specialists meet net zero. Now, we cannot ignore the ever more urgent need to reduce our carbon emissions. We should have all reacted with extreme alarm at the UN climate change report announcing the status of code red for humanity. There is much we need to do both as individuals and companies. And today we ask you, should carbon offsetting be the only answer to your carbon reduction strategy? Well, of course, the answer to that should be a resounding no. Even in the most optimistic scenario, to achieve net zero, some carbon will need to be extracted from the air, and there has been an explosion of standards for nature-based solutions that will lead to carbon credits. However, a balance needs to be struck, and plans need to show this. The race for net zero is now the frame of reference for ambition on climate change, and we have seen a 300% increase in companies publicly sharing their ambition to achieve this challenging target in the last 12 months. This is mostly likely just to be the tip of the iceberg. Net zero responses involve cutting emissions, removing CO2, and then offsetting the residual carbon that cannot be resolved in any other way. It is important that companies don't just jump on offsetting as the sole option without first making great strides in cutting their emissions. Now, within your strategy, there will be some carbon reduction challenges that are simply too difficult to achieve quickly. In many cases, the technology has not yet developed sufficiently to enable those changes to be made today. So, offsetting should relate to the portion of your reduction strategy that cannot be changed quickly or is outside of your control. So how is best to offset your residual emissions? This webinar today will focus on why woodland creation should be a fundamental part of your residual carbon offset plans, because trees are the only option that can actually remove carbon from the environment. Our first presenter, Dr. Michael Fagbahangbi, Teal Hill's carbon manager, will answer the question, is there a market for quality carbon credits, and what are the quality control pointers? He will also explain the pitfalls of the other carbon offset programs and how to avoid them. He will dig deeper into the authenticity and traceability of carbon offsets and the importance of using the UK Woodland Carbon Code. Michael holds a PhD in environmental science and has worked in the fields of renewable energy and resource management with a combined 7 years of experience in low carbon technology development, ESG framework implementation, and carbon management in agriculture, processing and distribution. His career also includes carbon reduction innovation, bioenergy, waste and wastewater treatment processes, all of which are linked to knowledge transfer activities and the use of innovative research and development support mechanism for enterprises. Our second presenter today is David McCulloch, head of CarbonStore, who will explain the practicalities of purchasing woodland carbon units authorised and issued by the Woodland Carbon Code through CarbonStore. He will explain the unique advantages of working with CarbonStore to realise your net zero ambitions, before concluding with a case study to illustrate how we can deliver woodland creation projects which protect our environment, enhance our ecology and enrich our society. This webinar will include a Q&A panel with our presenters and guest speakers, so please remember to place your burning questions into the Q&A panel on your screen as the webinar proceeds. And with that, I will hand you over to Michael. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Georgina. And thank you for listening to us this morning. My name is Michael Fagbahangbi. I am the carbon manager here at Teal Hill and BSW. My role is to develop a strategy to achieve net zero carbon emission. In this presentation, I would like to talk about the principle of good offsetting, using the Woodland Carbon Code as a case study. I have been comparing its qualities and characteristics to other offsetting standards, and I would like to discuss my impression on that with you today. There are 6 well-known principles on which offset standards are evaluated. These are detailed in the International Carbon Reduction and Offset Alliance Code of Best Practice, and I will just run through them briefly. The first rule of thumb is to check if the offset is real. So the question is the offset real? The emission removal must have genuinely occurred. Secondly, is the project additional? It must not have proceeded without carbon finance. Are the removals measurable? They must be quantifiable. Is the emission removal permanent? The standard must protect the principle of permanence. Is the offset unique? Projects must be identifiable and their credits properly recorded. Is the offset verified? Project must be independently checked and audited. There is one final criteria outside the accrual core principle on which to judge an offsetting project. Does it support wider ESG objectives? In this respect, contribution towards the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals is a useful benchmark against which to measure a project ESG related benefits. As a case study, the Woodland Carbon Code is the standard for woodland-based voluntary carbon offsetting projects in the UK, and it enjoys strong credentials, having been developed and implemented by DIFRA and the Forestry Commission in 2011. It is backed by the UK. It also enjoys the international recognition, having recently been endorsed by ICROA. And finally, it is operated by Scottish Forestry. These various influences and endorsements mean that the code scores highly in two important respects. It ensures high standards of woodland creation, maintenance, and management across the UK. And David will discuss more about this in this presentation. It is also a robust, credible, and highly respected offset standard, which, as I will now explain, meets the exact standards required by a sustainability manager seeking to develop a reputable and reliable carbon mitigation strategy. Before I explain how the Woodland Carbon Code adheres to each of these principles, I should first address one peculiarity of the carbon credit issued by the code. Due to the long time taken for trees to sequester carbon, the code issues two types of units. The first type is called pending issuance units, or you may say PIUs. These are assigned to a new planting scheme once it is validated. The second type are called Woodland Carbon Units, or WCUs. These are the successors to PIUs, and they represent 1 ton of sequestered carbon. PIUs are converted into WCUs when a scheme is verified by an independent auditor, usually at years 5, 15, 25, 25, and so on through its life. Because WCU represents a verified ton of sequestered carbon, companies buying can use them immediately to offset their emissions. How then does the Woodland Carbon Code adheres to each of the principles discussed earlier? In the case of tree planting, testing the reality of removal is straightforward. Are the trees growing tall and strong? As carbon sinks, woodland remain the only practical technique to remove directly carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. As such, woodland creation is the only offsetting scheme aligned with the Oxford principle to shift offsetting towards carbon removal, where offset directly remove carbon from the atmosphere. Secondly, verification of a woodland-based offsetting scheme is central to the Woodland Carbon Code's methodology. All projects operating under the code must be verified within 5 years of planting and thereafter at least every 10 years. Finally, the volume of carbon sequestered by the Woodland Carbon Code project is measurable and accurately quantified. The science which underpins this calculation has been drawn from forest research, the Forestry Commission world-renowned research department. It is also important to emphasize the conservative nature of these assumptions. A 20% discount is applied to the true assessment to minimize the risk of any overestimation. Moving on to consider how the Woodland Carbon Code respects the other principle rather of additionality, permanence, and traceability. How does the code prove that the woodland would not have been planted without carbon funding? This is essential. In practice, the code requires projects to pass 2 tests, the legal test and the investment test. Now, the legal test, any woodland which must be planted by law cannot be validated under the Woodland Carbon Code. Simple. With regards to the investment test, the purpose of the investment test is to demonstrate that over the project duration, without carbon finance, woodland creation is either not the most financially attractive option for that area of land or financially viable on that land at all. The test involves evaluating all costs and revenues for the project duration and requires documentary evidence to support the costs and potential income set out. Being a form of natural capital, woodlands are inherently susceptible to natural elements such as wind and fire. Hence, the Woodland Carbon Code therefore uses a centralized buffer scheme to ensure the carbon has been permanently sequestered and protect the claims of permanence implicit in its WCUs. Finally, all WCUs and PIUs authorized by the Woodland Code are fully traceable. Each project holds an account with the UK Land Registry, Carbon Registry, operated by IHS Marquis. Maps, grid references, and sequestration details of each project are therefore publicly available. On this final page, I briefly want to highlight the wider benefit of woodland creation. In the context of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, as it contributes towards 12 of the UN's 17 SDGs. Some benefits such as improving life below water, life on land, and climate change are self-evident. Other benefits are less obvious but equally important. Many woodlands are in remote rural parts of Scotland and Wales, lacking jobs and opportunities. The planting and management and maintenance of a woodland therefore bring economic activities to deprived parts of our countryside, and so in so doing helps reduce inequalities. The timber generated by productive woodlands by simultaneously sequestering carbon and growing a vital raw material to build our homes, offices, helps deliver sustainable consumption, responsible and sustainable infrastructure and help promote sustainable economic growth. Please keep in mind that when purchasing carbon credit generated by Woodland Carbon, the UK Woodlands, you are not only directly creating many positive and enduring co-benefits, you are also buying robust, credible, and authentic carbon credits. With this, I will hand back to Georgina. Thank you for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. Now, our next speaker is David McCulloch. David has an honours degree in accounting, finance and economics and has 18 years experience in the financial sector, based in London and Tokyo, initially as an equity salesman and later as a corporate analyst. David has extensive knowledge of the woodland carbon market and the steps needed for companies to buy carbon credits. And don't forget to pop your questions in the Q&A panel. Over to you, David.
Great, thanks very much, Georgina, and I hope you can see my screen clearly. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for listening to us today. Michael has already outlined the rules and the regulations governing UK-based carbon-oriented woodland creation under the Woodland Carbon Code. And for us in CarbonStore, these robust rules are especially important because all of our woodland schemes are registered, regulated and authorised by the Woodland Carbon Code. And as such, all of our projects adhere strongly to ICROA's Code of Best Practice. The evolution of the Woodland Carbon Code has created a need from both companies such as yourselves and woodland owners for a new set of services. And given CarbonStore's background, we are ideally placed to deliver those services. So I'll talk briefly about our origins before then going on to explain the services which we provide. And that then sets the scene to understand why CarbonStore should be an essential contact for anyone wishing to buy carbon credits from UK-based woodlands. So CarbonStore is a business division of Till Hill, and we generate and sell the PRUs and the WCUs, which Michael explained in his presentation. And Till Hill is the leading woodland creation and forestry management company in the UK. And amongst its team of forest managers, it's got the largest pool of silvicultural knowledge and experience of any private sector organisation in the UK. Alongside Till Hill's forestry managers, CarbonStore also works very closely with many other skilled and qualified independent forestry managers. And so our services focus on two activities. We work with forestry managers to register projects with the Woodland Carbon Code, to validate those projects, to deliver PRUs, and then in time to verify the projects to secure WCUs. And as such, we're fulfilling the role of project developer of an offset scheme. And we're also providing a marketplace for these validated PRUs and verified WCUs, enabling woodland owners to sell and companies to buy woodland carbon credits. And as I shall explain later, we have dramatically improved the functioning of that market. For CarbonStore, these links through both Till Hill and other independent forestry managers ensure we have broad and deep contacts across the forestry, the farming and the landowning sectors throughout the UK. And together with the legacies from Till Hill's market-leading position, these various attributes help us to deliver a markedly better quality of service to you as our clients. We offer a broad and varied choice of carbon sequestering woodland projects of all types, size and species mix across all corners of Britain. You as sustainability managers representing companies have many different needs and wishes when buying woodland generated carbon credits. Through your marketing activities, you will be identifying yourselves closely with the woodlands from which you buy carbon credits. And you will also be closely affiliated with the benefits which those woodlands bring. So as a result, you're understandably keen to select the right type of woodland in the right place with suitable access signage and photography rights. Our broad range of projects means that we can meet your needs. Often companies are keen for a project's background story to chime with their own activities. For example, companies in the restaurant sector often want to work with farmers who are producing the beef and the lamb that they serve in their restaurants. Home builders, for example, are keen to buy carbon credits from woodlands that are growing the timber that will be used to build our houses and homes. And we can help in all of those different ways. Great skill, experience, and knowledge is needed to design and plant and manage a woodland so the right trees are in the right place and a healthy, thriving woodland and wildlife habitat emerges. By sourcing our projects from skilled forestry practitioners in Till Hill and elsewhere, you, as the buyer of the carbon credits from those woodlands, can take comfort that they are in good hands, being properly cared for, so that they sequester the predicted volume of carbon. And finally, Till Hill has been managing woodlands since 1948. And this longevity is the result of doing things responsibly, conscientiously, and thoroughly. And this ethos has inevitably influenced us in CarbonStore. It is best illustrated in the legal contracts which we draw up between yourselves buying carbon credits and the woodland owners who are selling them. It is vital that buyers of woodland carbon credits have confidence that their woodlands will be managed properly, so that the trees in their projects grow healthily and sequester the expected volume of carbon. By clearly outlining the responsibilities and the commitments of woodland owners, our legal contracts ensure that they act responsibly so that a constructive and a positive long-term relationship exists between the buyer and the seller of the carbon credit. We were actually really encouraged recently during discussions with a well-known law firm that was representing one of the counterparties in a transaction we were arranging, who actually said you could drive a coach and horses through the other legal contracts in this sector. This is the first robust, credible and serious contract I've seen in the woodland carbon market. So moving on, when you buy PRUs through CarbonStore, our prices, or the prices that you pay for PRUs using us, are more competitive than those that are available through our competitors. Even though our projects are better quality, we tailor the signage and the access rights specifically to your needs, and your legal contracts are more robust. So how is it that we're offering a better service at a lower price? It stems from the fact that we've improved the way the market operates. Until recently, the market for woodland carbon credits was dominated by middlemen. And they have been buying PRUs at one price from woodland owners, and then they have been selling them on at a higher price to yourselves representing companies. As a result, their profits are largely determined, not exclusively, but largely determined by the markup they achieve between the price which they buy from woodland owners and the price which they sell on to you in the companies. And it has had various negative consequences across the market. It means that you, as buyers, are paying more for your PRUs than necessary. It also means the woodland owners are receiving less for their PRUs than they should be. And finally, it means that the true price of PRUs and WCUs has been blurred and obscured by the way the market has functioned. So in CarbonStore, we're approaching things differently. We help buyers and sellers directly agree a price at which they are both happy to exchange. And we in CarbonStore then just charge a straightforward and visible percentage-based commission fee for arranging the transactions. And we believe that the transparency and the certainty which our approach brings to the market represents a significant improvement, bringing clarity, certainty and trust between all parties in the transaction. So how do you go about buying PIUs through CarbonStore? The process can be separated into 5 simple steps, which I'll explain on the next page. But it starts with 5 straightforward questions. How many tons of greenhouse gas emissions are you looking to offset? A rough rule of thumb is that 1 hectare of broadleaf woodland sequesters 350 tons of carbon over its lifetime. So the size of your offsetting requirements then influences the size of the woodland project that you end up sponsoring. What sort of woodlands would you like to identify with? As I mentioned earlier, many prefer broadleaf schemes, but those working around timber or wood-based products such as paper mills and architects in the construction sector may prefer to work with productive conifer plantations. Thirdly, have you got a geographical preference for the project? Some companies are indifferent on this, but many others understandably want projects that are located close to their offices so they can contribute directly to their local communities. Fourthly, what are your payment preferences? Again, some companies will pay the landowner 100% of the fee up front for the PIUs. However, both parties may wish to stagger the payment, perhaps over 5 or possibly 10 years, either to reduce the burdens on cash flows if you're a company buying PIUs, or if you're the farmer or landowner receiving them, to generate a more income type revenue. Finally, at what stage of the process would you like to get involved with the project? Validated projects have, by their nature, already been planted. However, we also have many farmers and landowners on our books who are unsure whether or not to proceed with planting. So if, even before they start planting, they have a committed buyer of PIUs, that enables them as the landowner to de-risk the financials associated with the project. And it also allows for you as a company buying the PIUs to engage yourselves at a much earlier stage in the process of the planting. So moving on and looking at the simple steps for companies buying carbon credits. So based on your answers to these various questions, we will then speak to the woodland owners and draw up a list of potential projects which we will present to you for further consideration. We will detail the background story, we will outline the level of access and signage rights and other relevant points. We will also start to discuss prices at this point, as not all schemes are alike, so their prices do vary. Once you've selected the project that best meets your needs, we will liaise with the woodland owner and their representative, the forest manager, to agree terms such as price and signage. CarbonStore, meantime, will represent your interests as the buyer. And this division of representation is the fairest way to reach agreement on the various points outlined above, which we will then include in the legal contracts. With the terms and conditions agreed, we will send across the legal contracts for you to review and sign. And the final step is then to transfer the payment and the PIUs, both of which should be straightforward and uncomplicated formalities, so that the PIUs end up being held in your name and publicly visible on the UK Land Carbon Registry. Finally, you will have valuable marketing, signage, access and photography rights to the woodland. CarbonStore and Till Hill, through our knowledge and our interest in woodlands and wildlife, will gladly support any on-site activities or events which you wish to arrange, be they educational tours for local school children, planting days for your colleagues, or wildlife walks perhaps for your clients. In my final slide, I would like to talk about an especially interesting young woodland, which will sequester 3,075 tonnes of carbon over its lifetime, and on which all the PRUs are currently available for sale. Although it is located deep in rural Northumberland, close to Hadrian's Wall, it is just 30 minutes drive from Newcastle and is therefore easily accessible by train from London and the Midlands. It is owned by the UK's oldest charity, who bought the farm on which it's situated back in 2015. And their goal is, by reinvigorating the wildlife and the ecology on the land, to enhance its income and help pay for the almshouses and the care homes which are under the charity's responsibility. The prospect of carbon funding has therefore been absolutely central to the woodland's inception, because without it, the woodland would not generate the income foregone from farming the 6 hectares of land which have now been planted up with trees. And those trees are a mix of species that are either native to the area, such as birch or rowan and some oak, or that are right for the land, such as alder, which thrives in damp conditions and has therefore been planted along the riverbanks. The planting is split across 5 parcels, which by providing food and shelter for insects, birds and wildlife will reinvigorate the local biodiversity. The riparian planting along the banks of the River Reed will also replenish salmon and trout numbers. These ecological benefits, the positive background story, the good location and the access rights which the charity is willing to grant all mean that the charity is hoping to sell the PRUs for at least £17.50 each. So please feel free to email me personally after the presentation if you would like to learn more about this. On that final note, thank you for listening, and I will pass back to Georgina.
I'd like to welcome back our presenters. So if Michael, would you like to come and join us? And we do have 2 further people joining the panel today. We have Stuart Pearson, who is Teal Hill's Business Development Director and Chartered Forest Manager with over 36 years experience in the forestry industry in both the public and private sector. Also joining us is CarbonStore's Carbon Project Manager, Alex McKinnon. Alex works on the technical side of CarbonStore, working directly with managers and clients to efficiently register, validate and verify projects. He also works with incoming purchasers to identify and assess potential project carbon units that suit their preferences. So you're all here, brilliant. Let's get to the questions. We've got an anonymous question today, which is for Michael. Michael, based on the ICROA requirement for a carbon offset to be unique, could you explain how any woodland carbon unit are reported beyond the offset buyer? I.e., does UK government account for the same units in its international greenhouse gas reporting?
Thank you, Georgina. With regards to the UK government, I might have to get back on that one. But what I know is that ICROA member firms offer the highest quality service for entities interested in offsetting, and they are audited annually by a third party to ensure the quality of the offset that they offer. And you know, with regards to how they report beyond the offset buyer, I mean, since the ICROA body is able to audit them, is able to audit what they are doing, and this is a third party auditing. I think that it also shows how serious they are about quality offsets in itself. I don't know if David
Michael,
wanted to add
just to follow up on that, because I mean, one way that perhaps answers this question is that verified woodland carbon units can only be used by companies operating within the UK to offset their carbon emissions. It can't be used by companies to offset emissions generated outside the UK. So I hope that helps answer your question on that front.
Wonderful, thank you, David. David, we've got a question from Peter McCann. How can the timber be used as raw material for the likes of building if the sequestration is supposed to be permanent under the code? Surely, if the timber is harvested for any use, then the carbon will eventually end up in the atmosphere again.
Yeah, and actually, Peter, the calculator that you use in order to calculate the Woodland Carbon Codes calculator that determines how many tons of carbon is going to be sequestered by your woodland. Within that, you plug in what your management plan is. Now, in the case of productive conifers, which you would be harvesting perhaps at year 40 or year 45, you would input that detail into the carbon calculator. Now, what it then does is it assumes that A, you harvest it, and B, you then replant it. And as the trees regrow on their second cycle, it sequesters more carbon. And I mean, I can go into more details if you'd like to contact me after the call, because it's fairly complex. But essentially, harvesting is allowed and reflected in the Woodland Carbon Codes calculations in a nutshell.
Yeah, and just to add that, you know, not all the timber, some of the timber goes into construction where you know, they sit there as a carbon sink for a long period of time. So, you know, it's not to just think that, you know, every time you harvest timber, you know, you deliberately releasing carbon into the atmosphere, but some of this material go into construction, they go into furnitures, and they sit there as a carbon sink.
Wonderful, thank you very much both. We have a question from Neil Stange. Has CarbonStore looked at the carbon sequestration opportunities in regenerative agriculture or peatland restoration? One for you, David.
So regenerative agriculture, we have had some conversations regarding soil carbon. It is at very early stages, and the rules and the regulations governing soil carbon are not as advanced as the Woodland Carbon Code. So we're watching that market very closely, but we have made more progress on the peatland code, and I mean, we've got a number of projects that we're looking very closely at on that front. And that we're registering and in the process of validating as well. So Neil, please, again, please get in touch with me if you want to discuss particularly peatland restoration in more detail after the call.
Fantastic. Does anyone else want to add to that before we move on to the next question?
I just add to that, just very briefly. Yeah, peatland Peatland Carbon Code is an interesting one. While regenerative agriculture is very new itself, Peatland Carbon Code is also much newer than the Woodland Carbon Code, so things are at very early stages with that as well. They're also a different type of units rather than an actual sequestration unit. It's a reduction in emissions. So people should bear that in mind when they're considering comparing the Peatland Carbon Code and the Woodland Carbon Code. But other than that, I think David summarised that quite well.
Excellent, thank you very much, Alex. Peter Thompson has asked, further to the earlier question, can David clarify if PCUs, WCUs can be used to offset goods imported to the UK, both the transport carbon costs and the carbon production costs? For example, rice imported to the UK by a UK business.
Yeah, good question, Pete. And we're getting into the nitty-gritty of which country is responsible for which level of emissions. So happy to, I can look into that. I suspect that the emissions related to the import of that rice will start when it lands at the docks in Dover or Felixstowe or wherever. But it'd be an interesting one to look into more closely. sorry not to give a more precise answer, but you really are delving into the details on this one.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Did anyone else want to add to that one? No, fantastic. We're on to Sri Rahajo, permission to discuss how far is the implementation of sustainability specialists or engineering in business world? For example, in business to nature, business to government, business to business, and business to customer. Michael.
Yeah, a bit not. The question is not clear, but I'm suspecting the SAR meant the implementation of sustainability in the business world, and if that's what you intending to write, implementing sustainability in the business world is one of the ways that we can actually prevent and reduce carbon emission. It's the first level, is the first approach, if I may say, to reducing carbon emission, because sustainability in itself, if you look at it in terms of environmental sustainability, where you're looking at your energy use as a business, or how do you reduce that energy use, or how do you start moving from fossil fuel to renewable form of electricity, which helps you to run a greener venture. So yes, sustainability, again, I would say, is one of the ways that we can reduce and prevent carbon emission within the business spheres. And then for any other aspect of the business where you cannot reduce, you cannot prevent the emission, then you need to look at offset, compensation, which is what we are talking about today, your residual emission, using offset or compensation to reduce that. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you very much. And that was the last question. Sorry, Stuart, you didn't get to answer any questions about trees, but I'm sure anyone who wants to join any of the upcoming Teal Hill webinars, they can ask Stuart their questions there. So thank you very much, everyone. No more questions? Brilliant. So I want to end today to say I hope that you feel that our presenters have given you an insight and better understanding of how planting trees really must be an integral part of your company's carbon emission reduction plans. CarbonStore provides an open and transparent platform for companies to buy woodland generated carbon units and works hand in hand with Teal Hill, the UK's leading woodland creation and management company, and Mailer Forest Nurseries, the UK's leading commercial tree producer. Over the years, Teal Hill has planted over 1 billion trees. We do this as a living and know what we're doing. We want you to benefit from our experience. So thank you for listening and for your questions. And on behalf of CarbonStore and Teal Hill, we would like to thank everyone who registered for this webinar. You will all receive a copy of the recording in the next few days. And please do get in touch with us for further information on anything you have heard today. I will share a slide at the end with our email address and website. And with that, I hope you will truly consider UK woodland creation and working with CarbonStore as part of your race to net zero to protect our environment, enhance our ecology, and enrich our society. Thank you.